to a special on-location bookmark coming to you from the Catholic Marketing Network in Chicago. And stopping by our EWTN Bookmark booth is Sister Dominic Rasmussen, a good friend of the network. How are you doing?
Great to see you, Doug. Thank you.
And everybody loves the sisters. You know, we always think of you with all the shows you've worked with us on. Yeah. And you've got a new show that we wanted to talk a little bit about, Disciple of Christ, Education and Virtue, the mini-series.
Yes.
That, now, we're happy with it. We understand even better that you're happy with it.
Oh, I am, very much so. Yes,
okay.
yes.
So you've been getting a good response?
Yes, it's been, actually, since you aired it,
right.
that was just, gave a great exposure to us, and it increased the awareness of all the work we're trying to do
right.
to raise up a generation
right.
that desires to live virtuously.
Right. And we'll also talk later in the show with Monica Fitzgibbons about some of the CDs and other things that are coming out later in time for Christmas, hopefully. And
it will be, definitely.
Of course. So let me talk to you about this. I spoke with Sister Joseph Andrew not that long ago about And Mary's Yes Continues.
Yes.
And that seemed to be something that you really saw as an order as being a central theme to where you were going, right?
Right. Yeah, I think there was a sister really, her work, in which I'm sure when you had that conversation,
right.
she's worked almost her whole life with vocations.
Right.
And she really is gifted in recognizing a religious vocation in a young woman, and really has a deep love and passion for consecrated life.
Right.
And one thing that we noticed, that there was a gap in the culture of people understanding what religious life is, what's the theology of it, So I think she had a great vision of putting together an understanding of that, and then kind of rounded it out so it wasn't too heavy of a read, and having different stories or different examples of sisters and their discernments, they had. So
and we talked about the whole idea of the miniseries Disciple in Christ, and the whole idea of education in the virtues.
Yes.
And that's important, though, especially since most people aren't sure what a virtue is. Is tolerance the main virtue of the age? Sometimes it seems like it might be. Now, this is part of a whole educational program you're rolling out, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, so if we want to have people to be able to have, and say Mary's yes, okay?
Right.
Well, Mary's yes will flow more freely from a heart that's already formed in virtue.
Right.
And I think when
how does one get formed in virtue? When you're inculcating that into a child, what do you mean forming them in virtue?
Right. Well, you alluded to the thing earlier, when you were just talking about even just understanding what the word virtue means.
Right.
And one thing that's one reason why we did the mini-series is I realized that there are people that just didn't even understand what virtue is. And very simply, it's the habit of doing good. Right. It's a response to God's grace. And I think there's an understanding, we're trying to form, the bishops are leading us, trying to, informing missionary disciples, living as disciples of Christ. And this is a response when we see God's love and goodness to us.
Okay.
So when we understand God's love, we want to respond of a life of goodness. A life of goodness is a life of virtue. And people not understanding just simply what the word virtue may mean, but all the beautiful virtues that form, this is based on the teachings of St. Thomas Aquinas. So the theological virtues, faith, hope,
you
and
Dominicans
charity.
hang together, right?
Right, that's right, we do. We could look at a few Franciscans, I know, thank goodness Francis and Dominic were friends.
Where we are, but...
And then, the cardinal virtues, what are they, and what are all the cardinal virtues that align? I'll tell you what they are. I won't quiz you, Doug.
Please, thank you.
Prudence, justice.
No more embarrassment.
That's right. Temperance and fortitude.
I'm flashing back to 7th grade.
And I'll get my little ruler out, and you didn't get that one down.
That's right.
But I think when we look at it, the first thing we focus on, we tell people, is we just need to learn this beautiful language of virtues. What are they? What do they look like? What do they sound like? And once you understand that, it's like trying to understand math. You got to get the math facts down before you can do more complicated life. So then as you understand what the virtues are, then you figure out how you can incorporate them into your lives. And that's when you and I had done that show on the life of Christ.
Right, exactly.
So I say that we look to Christ, the person of Jesus Christ, who in his being, who he is, he has all the virtues.
Right.
He shows us, he as we draw closer to the person of Christ, we're going to want to be good.
Right.
And so in this Life of Christ and the other Lectio Divina journals that we work on, we integrate the virtues so you can see how you can live it. And then we move from live, once you live it, you love Jesus, what do you want to do? You want to be a witness.
Right.
And so that's a real way to kind of, if you think of those three buckets, to take all this, because it's very comprehensive.
Right.
You know?
And we have something, and we're offering already, something called a starter kit. What's a starter kit?
Yes, and you can get that on in the religious catalog. So if anyone, seeing this and they're thinking, oh yeah, I woke up this morning, I realized, okay, today I'm decided, you woke up this morning, I'm going to be better today.
Right.
So the starter kit is the way to get started.
Thanks to your prayer, sister.
Yes, right.
We'll see.
So in there's a virtue chart that's a really, if you've got lots of children, this is a great thing. All their materials are laminated because they came out of a school.
Lamination's important.
Exactly. When you come out of a school classroom, we want them to be indestructible.
Right.
And then there's also the virtue cards. That give you different scenarios of the different virtue cards, and then the saint cards, which is like you could do concentration or something, but those are examples of saints.
But no poker with this.
No, well, I don't know, who knows.
Or 52 drop or something like that.
But on there, on the back, it has the meaning, and then a prayer, because the most important thing to remember, what makes, I think, this virtue program different than what Stephen Covey has done, which is good. Right. But we understand as Christians, as in love with the person of Jesus Christ, that it's a response of grace.
Well, let me ask you a question. It's interesting because you brought up Covey. Now, Covey was a Mormon.
Yeah.
So did that have an impact on maybe the way he would do it versus
it could.
a Catholic approach might be?
Yeah, because I think with the Catholic perspective is that if we don't want to fall into a Pelagianism where
it's kind of a works-oriented
get my
kind
virtue
of thing.
muscles built up.
Exactly. Right.
We see it as a response of grace.
Right.
That God's the one that leads us to this in holiness. It's that going, that saying yes to Him, and so that's why we have to learn. The language of virtues, so we know, what's affability.
Right.
What is affability? Affability is just being friendly.
Well, you're very affable.
Yeah,
say that.
I try to be. You didn't see me a couple hours ago. No.
Well, Disciple of Christ, Education and Virtues, whole book, and all these materials people can get, the starter kit. Let me ask you, the idea of even being a disciple.
Yeah.
We say, well, wait a second. Jesus is my brother. He wants me to call him friend. Is there a difference between being a friend or a brother and being someone's disciple?
That's a great question, and I would say yes, because a disciple is you follow and you look to the master, you look to the teacher.
Right.
And that's why when I talk about the Lectio Divina or reading Scripture, is that we have to, and of course, as Catholics we have the Blessed Sacrament, we go to Mass, we have spend time in adoration. But we always have to have Him here, that we're, looking at Him, He looks at us, to draw out, to see our weaknesses. That's the beautiful thing about virtue is that if we see our weaknesses or our vices, we can practice a virtue to help counter that. That's an antidote to it. So He's a teacher, He's our master, and it's more, we're constantly looking to Him. But if He's kind of like your brother, it's kind of like, I don't know, that's just my thought.
I was wondering, because I've heard that, and I think sometimes people misunderstand that idea. The other thing I was wondering about when somebody's looking at that is you're talking about somebody getting, becoming familiar with the virtues, and then that exposes to some degree some of the things where they need work. Right. Part of the problem a lot of times in society, people don't want to know what it is because they may have to change.
Exactly.
And they're not interested in that.
Yeah.
They wouldn't mind if there's a quick fix.
Right.
Somehow it's all okay, but can I continue to do what I'm doing but just have better results?
Right, exactly. And that's the thing is that there's a conversion, And when we talk about, living a life, and I think when you think about virtue, it's a very, you're striving towards a positive.
Right.
And one thing we've noticed in the school cultures or even families, when they start to use this language of virtue, you go from an atmosphere where it could be negative to more of a positive.
Okay.
But when you talk about, because sin, there's a pleasure with sin. You don't want to, not yet. The famous thing with Saint Augustine. I don't want to, just not yet, God. But I think the thing when we talk about living virtuously is that. You have at the beginning, it's harder. You know, I can think of a friend of mine who told me that, you know, this summer she was going to work on courtesy, you know, and so like for the first couple of weeks I noticed, she told me about it every day. She doesn't talk about it anymore, but I've noticed a change.
Right.
So it's become a habit.
Right.
It's become a habit as she's no longer having to think about opportunities to be courteous. She's just, it's more natural.
Right.
And that's what we're aiming towards.
She doesn't have to think about it
exactly,
anymore because
no
it becomes
it just happened,
part
you know?
of who
But you have to
she
kind of
is.
set, she goes, I realize this is something I really need to work on in myself.
Now, you teach in schools,
Yes.
and obviously in various dioceses, and you also offer a program that obviously can be taught in your schools. I'm assuming this is also available certainly for homeschoolers.
Absolutely.
Would this also be available for a parish school?
Yeah, it can be there's a lot of parish schools that use them, homeschooling families, religious ed. Actually, I know of a gentleman that is incorporated into his business.
Okay.
He has a newsletter, and they focus on a virtue every month. So
Right.
it really, if a person in leadership or a person who understands that they take ownership of the language and they want to do it, then they can be as creative as possible when they're doing it. You know, so it's exciting.
And so we, like I said, have had a great reaction to the video and things like that. I'm assuming you're having a good reaction. Are you planning on expanding the program? And if so, how?
Yeah, well, in my mind, if you guys want to make an offer, I'd love to do it.
Do some more programs?
Yeah.
I'm sure we would be open to that. I'm sure Peter Gang out on the boys.
And even someone the other day, they were saying, because I think what happens is what we did with the miniseries, that's the introduction.
Right.
And it just kind of gets people, whets their appetite. I mean, Bishop Olmsted in this thing is amazing.
Well,
how clear he is.
He's a great
and
man.
Bishop Oyer, and just this
too.
Dominican priest, Father Boniface, who's giving the teachings on it. And so it just kind of, as soon as you see it, you're like, okay, I want more. You know?
Well, we might have to rejigger the team. We're not sure the producer whether he would be the guy we'd pick again to do, but we can think about it.
Yeah,
we'll have to
we'll
see.
leave that up to the Lord.
We'll have to leave that up to the Lord. So it's very good. Sister John Dominic, and of course the Life of Christ, and we're talking about the Disciples of Christ, a wonderful program, and of course our mini-series, Disciple of Christ, and we feature it, and it's also featured through the EWTN Religious Catalog. And thank you so much, Sister John Dominic. Next, we're going to talk with Monica Fitzgibbons.
That'll be awesome.
After a quick break. Thank you, Sister.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you too.
And now we are joined here in our bookmark booth by Monica Fitzgibbons, who along with her husband Kevin is the founder of De Montfort Music, and that's a division of AimHigher Entertainment and AimHigher Recordings. Really important. I didn't realize you had so many levels to your expertise here, but you were also involved, you and your husband, with actually producing the program Disciple of Christ, Education and Virtue that the sisters did. I just finished talking to Sister John Dominic about as well. So you're just Renaissance people here. You have all these things going on. You came out of the secular business and got involved with the Catholic marketplace. Why?
Well, it was just that we were going deeper in our faith, and this was what we knew how to do, and we had told a lot of behind the music stories, and
I remember that show.
Yeah, exactly. So, those would always be things that would connect with people more when there was a human interest story behind it. And as you just spoke with Sister John Dominic, tough act to follow.
Right.
She's developed this amazing education and virtue, which we didn't really have, and so.
And how did you get together, actually? When did you first working with the sisters?
We've been working with them for a long time.
Right,
because
I know
we
that.
have
But
put
so
out
when
their
did it
albums,
start?
as you know. Probably like 2012.
Okay.
And we had known them because I'm from Michigan originally, and watched them sort of start up and grow. And I mean, didn't really know anything about nuns or sisters, and was a little afraid to even be in the room with them, But then I was like, wow, I could be like their how do you solve a problem like Maria. And So no, but they're just so accessible.
So now you're
and
going to work
young
on the
and
Sound
bright.
of Music for everybody.
Exactly.
Okay.
So anyway, but my idea is like we have to go in the reverse. Like, you know, they ended up in the convent instead of, you know, falling in love with their, you know. But anyway, but they're wonderful, as you know.
So when you work on something like, and we'll talk about some of the new works that are coming up, when you work on, let's say, music, monastic music or sacred music, how is that different for you and your husband in the sense of when you worked in the more secular music field? What's similar about it? Because people sometimes think everything's different, and there are certain aspects whenever you're creating anything that are similar, right?
Absolutely. Well, they should be if we're doing it right, you know. And you know this from your background, that you can take that. I'm sure that's what Mother Angelica saw in you, is that, you know, people are used to certain deliverables. She saw I
needed a lot of help. She thought coming to Alabama would be very good for my soul.
And she was so right.
That's right, she was.
She was a visionary, as we know.
Definitely.
But, you know, people are used to certain deliverables, stories. You know, they want to know not just who wrote the book, but about their lives. And that's just the world we live in, natural curiosity. And so that's what we've tried to do with the music, is that, you know, if they're going to go and get it on Spotify, or they're going to go order it from the religious catalog, and they're used to hearing things at a certain quality, we want to make sure that even though it is monastic music, that it's presented in that way.
Right. Now, it seems like you've had the ability, maybe surprising at times, I mean, we know with the monks in the past, with some of the Gregorian chant and things like that, has surprisingly crossed over and gotten some mainstream attention. Were you surprised when that happened?
Well, you're always hopeful that you'll get a chance to tell the story without any kind of, you know, editing or strange, you know, but that's our background, and so those were our friends and our contacts, and we felt...
So you were able to leverage some of that, and it's a benefit for these artists.
I think so.
That's good.
I mean, that's natural.
Right.
And they loved the story because it was kind of different, and we were bringing it to them in a way that they could understand it. So I think sometimes there's that gap.
Right. Now, when you deal with people in the business and, you know, television and things like that, secular, do you find it in some sense that though there obviously is lots of issues and coarseness and people living in a very tough environment and in a culture that's not very Christian or Catholic, that behind the scenes and underneath there's a lot of people who at least have some, there's connection to some of these things that they still sense even if they're not sure why?
Yeah. Oh, we've had a lot of that where they will get into the story, a correspondent or somebody who's producing the story, and really it is the music though, because it is that multi-sensory.
Right.
I mean, it's so beautiful. So if you want to go in there and really go for it, the music has to be really well, it has to be as if you're there in their chapel, if you want to do this. And it touches them, like you said, in a way they don't realize it, and then they want to know more, or maybe want to go on a retreat, or it's not something that they're being exposed to.
There's more hunger out there than I think people like to let on.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And now, which of all the CDs you've produced so far in this genre, what's been the best selling?
Probably the Monks of Norcia, Benedicta. That was obviously going to be a very big international release because they're over in Italy.
Right.
As you know, they've gone through so much with this earthquake and then a series of bunch of other earthquakes that essentially flattened their basilica. So there was an initial
interest. That's true.
interest.
I didn't make the connection.
Yeah.
Right.
There was an initial interest in it, but then there kept being more because now that site where we recorded that, which is the birthplace of Saint Benedict and Saint Scholastica with the crypt and everything, that's gone.
Yeah, we just had a documentary produced on Saint Benedict.
Yes, that's right.
Right.
So that's kind of a remnant of that place, and all of the acoustic there is no longer.
Right. So you have a unique piece, unfortunately, in that way.
Yeah.
But I guess maybe in another way, because their profile's been raised in some ways, maybe they can use their music and things to help raise money, which I'm sure they're trying to do right now to have it rebuilt. Right?
Absolutely. Right. And then, of course, the sisters had one out in 2013, the Dominican Sisters of Mary, Mater Eucharistiae, and that was a chart topper.
Right. So what charts, you think of charts, you don't hear it as much as you used to.
Yeah.
Kind of top 40, what chart you're on and stuff like that.
Right.
But so what particular chart, or is there a specific chart? Does it give me a rhythm and blues chart, a disco chart, or a hip hop chart? What chart is this?
This is the classical music chart.
Okay.
And
so it fits in. It's not even sacred. It's classical music.
Yes,
period.
That's how we, do it. That's how we view it. It has changed. What De Montfort and AimHigher, our sister label, has done, has changed the classical music
That's
charts
interesting. Okay.
Completely. Okay. Because for the past 5 years, our artists or one of our albums has been the year-ending #1. It's not that we set out doing that, but it just sort of worked out that way.
Sure.
And because it's choral music, and if it's done, in a way that's serious, it's part of the conversation now.
That's interesting. So it's similar to, I think, when we have our in-concert show, where we have sacred music and that, we do attract people who necessarily at times are interested more in the music than the sacramentality that might be behind it, but it is an opening to that situation too.
And PBS isn't doing as much of that stuff now, so you're really smart to be doing that.
Right. So we met with, we were talking with Sister John Dominic before about the whole program. You've worked with them before. So do you have something new coming up with them?
Yes, we do. As a matter of fact, we just recorded a new Christmas album with them, Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring. And it's Christmas with the Dominican Sisters of Mary. We went into their mother house in Ann Arbor, and we recorded it recently. So it was recorded in the summer, and that's when all the sisters are home, because as you know, they're teaching.
Right.
And so we really got just a beautiful group of sisters. We were blown away by it. A lot of things you've heard, but a lot of new things too.
Well, let me ask you, because working in the business, there's talent, there's people, everybody. Some people think I can't sing at all. Everybody thinks they can sing in the shower. But what is it about? Now, they obviously didn't take the sisters in because they were good singing in choir.
Right.
They had a vocation. They joined. They happened to be there.
That's true.
How is it possible to just take people like that who are untrained and put out something so beautiful?
Well, because they are singing a lot, part of with the Vespers and the and all the different liturgical seasons. They have just the right songs for that. But Sister Joseph Andrew, who you've met before, she's
a
very
good friend
Renaissance.
of the network. She's great.
Absolutely. She is sort of the music director of this, and she's quite an amazing musician in her own right.
I didn't know that.
A lot of people don't know that. She played the organ, but then she also will take a lot of this music. Here's an example. Silent Night's got to be in the repertoire, right? But we've all heard it. So then she takes that and sort of creates an arrangement into this Polish...
So she does arranging for these. Oh, wow. Okay.
Into this Polish lullaby that people haven't heard, and then ends it with Silent Night. It's the most gorgeous song you've ever heard. And then they've got violins, and so all these sisters come in here, and lo and behold, they have all these talents, and they're just giving them all to God, and we have been to the chapel and have been able to hear it, and we just want to present it that way.
Do you think it's interesting sometimes with people like that in that situation? I know we had it with our sisters. One of our sisters had been a concert violinist, and she would, here she was joining, thinking she was giving it up. Meanwhile, she was playing internationally at the Mass.
Yes.
And so the same thing, in some cases, you might have sisters who have these skill sets, and they think, in a sense, well, I'm putting that on the side for this.
Yes.
And actually getting greater exposure than they ever would have if they had stayed in the secular world.
And they're chopping the classical because, Sister Joseph Andrew is very classically trained. And yes, I mean, at a young age, she's going in and giving it up. But here she is now, topping the charts. And the same thing, we just had a Requiem album that came out with the fraternity. And one of the singers on there he was one of the top opera singers in Canada.
Okay.
And he gave that up, and I don't know if he would have ever been the #1 classical recording on Billboard through Sony International. So that's happened on actually a lot of our albums. And I think one of the things is that these communities tend to attract a lot of young people, and those voices are very beautiful that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now, also, there's the Ave Maria sung by the St. Paul's Boys Choir. Tell us about that.
Speaking of youth, well, it's the only Catholic boys choir school in the United States. And it's right there in the Diocese of Boston.
Right, okay.
But they're in Harvard Square. And they just celebrated recently their 50th anniversary.
Right, and we did something on the air with
sure
the Raymond Show
some
other things.
And you aired a special on them.
Exactly.
They did a Christmas album, Christmas in Harvard Square.
Okay, I remember that.
Yeah, we did a lot of fun things with EWTN.
Okay.
And now this is Ave Maria coming out on September 8th.
Okay.
And you can find it at the RC, Religious Catalog, EWTN.
Okay.
And so they're singing kind of a wide repertoire of songs that are polyphony, chant, but it's what they sing, and they do their own Vespers there and the liturgy there. And so because they're Catholic, they have all these opportunities because they're attached to the parish there. And actually an interesting factoid is that the new pastor there is a graduate himself from the school. So he went there when he was a little boy, and now here he is back as the pastor, Father Keller.
So we can look for all of that as we head towards Christmas.
Absolutely.
Okay, very much out of time, unfortunately. It's great to be
Always
with you.
Always a pleasure, Doug.
Thank you. Monica, who along with her husband Kevin, to Montfort Music, and of course Sister John Dominic as well. Great friends of the network, and this has been an EWTN on location from the Catholic Marketing Network in Chicago. Don't forget all of this, EWTN.com, EWTNRC.com for Religious Catalog, all things Catholic. Thanks.